Hi, and happy Easter to anyone who celebrates it. Um, slightly different location today. I'm speaking from Scotland, visiting my parents. So if you're just wondering about a bit different backdrop, that's the reason. Um, this is something I think has been important to talk about as a subject, because it's been in the news a lot of late, or rather, it's been in a lot of discourse. And I'm referring to the government's race report. Um, Obviously this is a volatile time anyway for race relations. Um, so inevitably the report was going to get a lot of debate. Like most people, I haven't read it in detail. I think it takes a bit of commitment and discipline to actually sit down and read a whole government report. So I'm not going to talk in great detail about the details because I haven't done it. So it would be, uh, you know, for that reason. But I have noticed that there's a lot of people just outright dismissing it who ostensibly haven't read it either. Maybe some have, but I think there's a lot of politics at play here. You know, in the case of other political parties, it's a government sponsored report. I believe it was commissioned by the Home Secretary and others. Could be wrong about that, but there's clearly politics at play in terms of the criticism, which is kind of to be expected, but that's unfortunate because I think something like this needs to be needs to have bipartisan support. And I think the controversy lies in the conclusion of this report is that there isn't deeply entrenched institutional racism in this country. Now, I'm always a little bit wary about questioning other people's experiences. I haven't been in their shoes. Maybe there are people who've personally experienced things that I can't relate to. I concede that. But where I do think it is legitimate to challenge this this notion of this being a racist country, I think that is something that needs to be challenged. We have almost 68 million people. Of course, there's going to be racists in this country, and I'm not one of these people that sort of has a knee-jerk reaction and says, all claims of racism are just overblown or exaggerated. There are some ignorant people in this country. There are some loutish, ignorant yobs. I've seen it. I've personally seen it. I've seen racial abuse in my city, in Sunderland. So I'm not going to say that there isn't a problem, but I do think that society has improved a lot, and I do think that where problems exist, they're generally shunned by wider society. You know, but that isn't the issue. Isn't about racial abuse. It's about issues to do with opportunities and so on. I mean, racial abuse is already tackled under hate crime legislation, as it should be. Although some would argue that there shouldn't be that component, it should just be straightforward, legislation to tackle, for example, common assault. I'm not sure I agree with that. I think if there is a racial component, it needs to be tackled. Um, say, for example, someone's getting yelled at in the street because of the color of the skin, and that could be anyone, depending on the context. That is different from an opportunistic crime. Um, However, I won't mince my words. I am deeply, deeply critical of those who really push critical race theory. The more I consider this, the more detrimental to society I think it is. Why? Because it is a perpetually cynical outlook. It's a perpetually cynical way of looking at society that every single problem that people face, minority people, must have a racial component. Um, Take, for example, one big one right now is in COVID deaths. There's been a disproportionate number of black and ethnic minority people who've died. Well, does that point to racism? I think there's more complex issues at stake. I think, for example, the vaccine cynicism with uh, with the minority community was quite high. That's improved now. There could be factors in that in terms of vaccine rollout. But critical race theorists would say, oh, this proves racism. There's mostly white people getting the vaccine. Well, that's how they would put it. But I do think it's a very, very manipulative worldview. Manipulative insofar as it's incredibly dystopian and cynical and depressing. Basically, for critical race theorists, a country like the UK, which has come a long way, is utterly shackling, utterly racist, and just keeps minority people down. Let's ignore the fact that the government, um, the top levels of government are run by ethnic minority Britons. Priti Patel, Rishi Sunak, Dominic Raab, Boris Johnson himself. There you have a cabinet of two British Indians, a man of Jewish descent, Prime Minister who's diverse, has a diverse background. I mean, we're not going to call Boris a minority, but it's what I find a little bit galling is that groups like Black Lives Matter, I honestly think they've brought race relations back in this country, and so do most people. And that isn't just right wing reactionaries, most people, including there's left leaning people that are critical of BLM. Um, because what they do is they vilify and condemn the police, but they never condemn black criminality. So there's manipulation in terms of the way we look at things like crime. As an example, if you look at London and stop and search, to critical race theorists, that proves institutional racism because it's mostly black kids that are stopped. And that could be the case in that area. Well, is that because the police have a racist streak and will just pick on the black kids? Or is it because in that particular area that they're policing, it just happens to be that more crimes are committed by blasphemy black kids? Um, I think that Sir Trevor Phillips is really onto something with this in terms of being a lot more honest about this debate because you get the woke crowd who demand that society is honest and they demand that we see things the way they do. But as soon as you want to be honest, oh well, then it's dog whistle politics. It's you see the way I look at it is if people really, really want to address these issues, we'll have to look at every angle, without constantly having debate shut down by people screaming racism. And I have to say, the left are very, very good at this, or rather, a certain component of the left, where they will manipulate a debate to suggest that their opponent is being their go-to is the person's dog whistling to the far right. I would argue by talking about this issue, you're taking it away from the extreme elements. Is you're bringing it mainstream. You're bringing it out in the open. You're getting it discussed. People can have whatever opinion they want, but it's being discussed. Um, Personally, I find it incredibly sad because I honestly think most people, it's a bit like male and female politicians. Most people do not spend a lot of time thinking about the other, you know, especially in bigger cities, which are naturally diverse anyway. I really think that most people just want to get on with their lives. So for me, from my perspective, critical race theory is incredibly divisive. Now, this is not the same as saying that there's no problems, because that's immediately the knee-jerk response. Oh, well, you're downplaying issues, you're downplaying racism. Not at all. I don't say that there isn't racism. I like to say I've personally seen it. But I do question what they think they're achieving with this. I mean, they clearly are not content with the current situation. They believe there's still institutional racism. Certainly was 30, 40 years ago when, there was very real racism problems in the police. There might be to some extent, but now the difference is it is tackled. Like that guy that was found to be a member of National Action was immediately fired. I think in that case, that's a vetting problem. How did they get in? Those are the sort of questions. But does it point to a culture of racism? I'm not sure that it does. I'm not sure. Anyway, I'm going to round this up because other people here and I prefer making these videos on my own time. So wrap it up. Your thoughts.